Hi everyone, good evening. How are you doing today? My name is Sangeeta. I'm the founder and CEO of Helpsy, and today we have a very special session for you. We are going to be talking to Khanna, who is a candidate for the election for our district, and we're going to discuss about health matters in our community. So I look forward to having this rich discussion with him and to hearing your questions. So the way we're going to start out is I'm going to share with you a little bit about Ro and a little bit about the role of a congressman. And then we are going to have some questions that are prepared to ask Ro. We're going to have some discussion and keep your questions handy and post them here on the video because then we'll be taking your questions live to ask Ro. So I hope that you will enjoy this session, and it's a great way for you to meet your candidates and know how they can impact and improve the health of our community. So thank you so much for joining. So let me share with you a little bit about Ro. So Ro Khanna is he's a candidate for the United States Representative, District 17, which covers Santa Clara, it covers Cupertino, it covers Fremont, and it covers part of Newark. So Ro has been a long-time Fremont resident. He has the values, energy, and expertise to represent our community in Congress and ensure gains from today's high-tech economy spread to the middle class. He's the son of public school teacher. Ro understands economic opportunity starts with a great education. It's true for Ro, whose parents are immigrants. Born in Philadelphia, Ro was raised with the values of hard work and academic excellence. Today, Ro is an educator teaching economics at Stanford. He'll fight to increase funding for K-12 schools, community colleges, and will make college affordable for California students. Praised for his service in the U.S. Commerce Department under President Obama, manufacturing exports. Working with San Jose Mayor Sam Liccardo to bring new jobs to our area and develop job training for returning veterans. These include equal pay for women, a pathway to citizenship for immigrants, religious tolerance, and freedom of expression. Our representatives need to do a better job of getting things done. Find common ground to advance our priorities and will take on Washington's culture of corruption. Ro Khanna refuses to take a single dime in contribution from PACs, corporations, and lobbyists. His only interest will be delivering results of our Congress district's working families. Looking forward to having Ro joining us. He's running a few minutes late. So in the meantime, share with you why getting involved in this policy and in our community at a government level is important. I want to share with you a little bit about what is the role of a congressman, why it's important. So in our country, as per our constitution, the US House of Representatives is the one that makes and passes the federal laws. And the House has two branches. One is the Congress and the other is the Senate. And the representatives are part of this Congress branch. So they represent our district at the federal level. So each representative who we elect, they have a 2-year term and they serve our district and represent it at the Congress level. And there are 4 main roles of a congressman. And these roles are they help with making policies. They also vote for the various policies that represent what we as a district believe is valuable. So they provide local representation on our behalf. They manage their office in the sense what are the needs of our local community. So they manage that and address those needs, and they help with making vital decisions related to our community. So they're basically working for us to address what we need. And that's why it's very important for us to get involved in these policies and bills, and get to know our congressmen so that we know what is going on and we can be involved and have our voices heard. So we look forward to talking to Ro about many of the issues. Um, I'm just going to pause for 1 second while I take his call. Hi, everyone. Just give us a few minutes of pause. We'll be right back with Ro. We're having a bit of technical difficulties. Hi, everyone. We are going to be with Ro in just a few minutes, just helping him to get logged in and join us. In the meantime, feel free to share your questions. I'll be collecting them and asking him at the end of our interview. So while we are waiting, why don't I share with you the questions that I have prepared, the areas, the topics that we are planning to cover. So I am wanting to cover, so what I'm going to cover with him is first just what he thinks about his representation, about our community and what he can do, as well as then we're going to go into Affordable Care Act and discuss about the challenges with Affordable Care Act and what he can work on. Next, we are going to touch on mental health because that's an important issue that many of us face in our community. So we are going to discuss about mental health and how we can support the community. Then we're going to touch on sexual harassment and discrimination. And then we are going to be talking next about the chronic health conditions in our community and what we can do to improve those. Next, we are going to touch on ethnic specific issues that are facing our community and how the representation and special needs of the community can be addressed. Next, we are going to touch on the needs of senior citizens. As we are a growing population in baby boomers, so we want to make sure we're taking good care of our senior citizens. So we're going to touch on that. And then we are going to cover the pain and opioid crisis that's facing our community. So those are the main things that I hope to cover with Ro, and I'm looking forward to your questions in what you want us to touch with him. Everyone, just give us 5 more minutes. We'll be right there.
Looks like we are on, I believe. We are on. Okay, great. We are on. We do not see anything except for a icon in the middle that looks like two shaking hands in the form of a heart. Great.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Hi, Ro. Welcome.
Hi, sorry with the technical difficulty.
No worries. I'm glad you made it. Well, so far we just had introduced you, and we talked about what is the role of a congressman in the district. So we just started to talk about that, and let me have you maybe introduce yourself in a few sentences again, and let me share my screen with you so I can share with you the question that we want to cover. All right. So welcome, and what? Yes, hi. Well, it's a pleasure to have you. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself and then talk a little bit about why you want to represent our community and how you think you can impact our community.
Well, I appreciate that, Sangeeta. I'm Khanna. I'm running to represent this district in the United States Congress. I worked for President Obama as his Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce, and now I teach economics at Stanford. I'm running to help support education. I think we need much more funding for our local schools. We also need a better curriculum that has a STEM education, digital literacy, arts, music, really preparing people for the 21st century. We need to make college far more affordable. I want to be very accessible to the community on immigration issues. Really, a lot of times you call up your congressman's office and it takes months to just get an appointment, and I'm going to be home every weekend at street corners, meeting people. So really want to help work on the issues and be accessible to the community.
Wonderful. We're very excited to have you. So our focus today, Ro, is going to be more on health and health-related issues that face our community.
Yes.
So Yes, I've prepared questions for you regarding that, and also to share with you what are the main challenges that face the various sectors in our community. So let me start with the first one. So Affordable Care Act. I'm sure you were expecting this question. So the Affordable Care Act, popularly we call it Obamacare, and the goal of Affordable Care Act is to provide better health security for our community and to expand coverage to include everybody, to provide access to healthcare for lower income, to guarantee that we have a choice and we hold insurance companies accountable. So that's been the main goal of the Affordable Care Act, to make it affordable. But the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, the rates are expected to rise 13% next year, which is 3 times the increase in the last 2 years. So it feels like Obamacare, or affordable care, which is supposed to be affordable, is not really affordable anymore. So what do you think you can do to improve these issues with ACA, and why you think we should join Affordable Care Act?
That's a great question. First, we need a public option, as even President Obama said, because that will put pressure on the insurance companies to lower the premiums and lower the rates. Without people having an option to buy into Medicare, buy into government health care, the insurance companies can continue to increase premiums. So the biggest thing we need is a public option. The second thing we need to do is have some form of tort reform so that we're not having medical malpractice suits that are driving up costs. And we have to have some form of regulation on these insurance companies and on pharmaceuticals. So much of the cost is prescription drugs. So we need far more leverage on getting imported drugs, so where people can re-import drugs which they have at cheaper prices overseas, and that we have leverage doing it. Of course, the Affordable Care Act, the exchange, I would encourage people to sign up if they have. If they don't have insurance, it's still better than not having insurance, and it's subsidized. But we have to do a better job in getting the premiums down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on an important point about the rising cost of prescription drugs. And I know that we will be voting on a proposition related to the prescription drugs. Would you like to educate our community about this prop?
Well, I'm a big supporter of Prop 61, the one you're talking about, which would basically give California the right to buy prescription drugs at a price that's similar to the VA. And the VA gets very good prices. And it would give us collective leverage so that these pharmaceuticals couldn't be jacking up the rates on a given hospital or given patient. And I think that I see it all the time, that these prescription drug prices have gone out of control. So I'm a big supporter of Prop 61. I hope people will vote for it. Of course, the pharmaceutical industry is putting billions of dollars to try to defeat it, but I think voters will see through that.
Absolutely. I think the price of many of the drugs are so high. I work in oncology, and I know that so many of the chemotherapy medications and many of the other medications that are life-saving for our patients are so expensive that even with the insurance coverage, just their premiums, it can bankrupt a lot of people and cause a huge financial burden. So yeah, absolutely. We hope that we are able to vote on Prop 61 and be able to reduce the cost. You talked about all of us signing up for the Affordable Care Act. For our audience, as they know, the open enrollment is coming up from 1st November. It's from 1st November to end of January, January 31st. If you want to get coverage from January 1st, you need to sign up by December 15th. And in California, our exchange is called Covered California. Ro, would you like to talk a little bit about Covered California and why the millennials should consider signing up for it?
When I did that when I was last cycle before I joined my new company. There was a time when I was in transition between the law firm and working at Smart Utilities, and I used the exchange. I signed up on the exchange for healthcare, and I found it to be very good. I found it to be reasonable in the premiums, and they paid for a lot of the basic doctor visits. So I think young people, of course, having healthcare insurance is important because you never know what unforeseen expenses can come in life. And I really highly encourage people to use the exchange if they aren't covered, because they'll find it reasonable and they'll find it covers most expenses.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let me move on to our next topic, which is mental health. So just for everybody, the open enrollment is November to January 31st. You can go to Covered California to sign up and learn more. So next, Ro, I would like to talk to you about mental health. And in US, 1 in 5 Americans are diagnosed with mood disorders. And for students, 1 in 3 students are typically diagnosed with depression. And when I think of Bay Area and our life here, it's stressful. It's stressful as a student. It's stressful as a working professional. And, the expectations are high for students and also for working professionals. We are living on cutting edge of technology. So we have a lot of pressure in terms of performing and staying at the top of the game. The anxiety, stress, and depression is very high in our community. And in fact, 30% of college students are diagnosed with at least one of these disorders. I suspect it's even more than 30% because of the stigma that's associated with mental health and the lack of resources. We are not even seeing as many people coming up and seeking resources. And the ones who do seek, there are not a lot of resources to offer them. And in the most unfortunate situations, students and young generation can resort to suicide. In fact, it was really alarming that the third leading cause of death among our young generation is suicide, which is really sad. So what do you think we can do to increase awareness and access for mental health and to support our community?
I think this is a very, very, very important issue. I mean, I see this all the time with students. There's the culture of too much pressure on these young kids. Whether no one, when I've been running for Congress, has asked me where I went to college, where I went to law school. So I think there's an obsession about putting pressure on getting into elite colleges, and an obsession about making the right test scores. So we have to step back and realize that we're putting too much pressure on young folks. They have to be able to make mistakes. They have to be able to play. They have to be able to have a social life, and not create this anxiety and demands. And that's a cultural change that we need as a community in high schools, at schools, having a holistic approach to education and a holistic approach to development. The second thing we need to do then is also to destigmatize mental health issues. A lot of times young people or others who have mental health issues feel a reluctance to get help because they think it's their fault. We shouldn't have that reluctance, and so we have to destigmatize it. And finally, we need far more funding, not just for mental health, but also for counseling, for counselors at school, so that we can see and diagnose any of these problems at an early stage before they get to a more serious stage.
Absolutely. I think you touched on some very good resolutions or way we can support the community. I think the culture is very strongly about performance in here, and that can put a lot of pressure, and lack of resources can make it difficult. Definitely the issue of stigmatization is really really strong, because we can openly come out and say that I have cancer, or I have heart disease, or I have diabetes, but very rarely will you have people who will come out and say I have anxiety, I have depression, or I have PTSD, and the struggle tends to be very high. You talked about funding and raising awareness in this area. Do you think there are bills or things that might be coming down the pipeline, or how do you think these issues can be brought to more light and resources put into it for California?
I think we need greater funding from the federal government. Right now, the federal government really doesn't have enough funding for mental health counselors, for actual counselors at schools. The federal government isn't funding the visits to doctors are often not covered. Mental health issues are often not covered in insurance, so we need to make sure that they're part of the Affordable Care Act and other insurance, that it's treated like any other medical condition, and that we have much greater coverage in it. And those are two things at a federal level that we should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are great points, and I hope that you'll continue to represent us in this area.
Absolutely.
I know that if Democrats win the election, Hillary Clinton is a big proponent of mental health. So I hope that we will see a lot of progress in this area.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton, I think, is a very strong platform to include more mental health coverage as part of the Affordable Care Act, to include more funding for counselors at school, to include more funding for mental health at hospitals and community clinics. So I strongly support that agenda.
Wonderful. Let me move on to our next topic. So I think this has been in the news a lot about sexual harassment and assault. While it's been glamorized, or not glamorized, but while it's become more obvious with all the things that is coming out in the news, I think it's raising awareness of how prevalent this problem is. 1 in 3 women are sexually harassed at work, and 1 in 5 women will be raped in US. I mean, I'm not talking about some other country or a very very traditional environment. Right here in our country, 1 in 5 women are raped, and 54% of the rapes go unreported, which means that so many women are harassed, so many women are discriminated, so many women are raped, and they don't even report it. And even if they did, it's pointless, because 97% of the rapists are not incarcerated. So even if somebody reported, 97 out of 100 of the cases will not be prosecuted. So you've talked about, I know you're very passionate about women's rights and equal pay for equal work. My question that comes to you is, for me as a woman who has experienced this, and almost every woman that I have met in my community, so many have talked about some aspect of discrimination and harassment. You talk about equal pay and equal working, the environment equally competitive for women. But if at the very basic level we cannot feel safe and we are not treated equally, how can we advance in the society? How can we be equal? So what do you think can you do for the women in our society, and what can we do to reduce the sexual harassment and ensure that the perpetrators are prosecuted appropriately?
Well, I appreciate that this is an issue that I'm very passionate about. I don't know if you're familiar with the Brock Turner case. He was a Stanford student. He had sexually assaulted someone, and the judge, Aaron Persky, gave him only a 3-month sentence. And I worked with Michelle Dauber, who was a Stanford professor, to support the recall of Aaron Persky, to make sure that the judge is removed from the bench. And I was one of the first people running for office to come out for that and said, look, this is unacceptable. we have to have a zero tolerance for sexual assault. And you're absolutely right, that goes underreported. One of the reasons it doesn't get reported is because it's not prosecuted, and the victim is often made the subject of the litigation. And so what we need to do is have zero tolerance, increase the sentences for sexual assault and rape, encourage a culture where people know that that they will be kicked out of school and put to jail if they engage in this behavior, and then create a safe zone for women to feel comfortable speaking out about this and reporting it. It has become, if you watch the movie Hunting Ground, it has become an epidemic, a national epidemic. Almost 20% at these schools of women face this, and yet it's being underreported. And Stanford only reports 3 or 4% in the surveys, where we know it's about 20%. So I think we need stronger sentencing. We need mandatory minimums for these crimes. We need a culture at college that has honest surveys so we understand this problem, and change the campus culture to have no tolerance. And I will work as someone who teaches economics at Stanford, who's worked with Michelle Dauber, the Stanford law professor who's really been the leader on dealing with campus sexual assault. I think I can be a very, very strong voice on it.
Wonderful. Oh, that's so great to hear that you were involved in the Stanford case, and you helped to recall that sentence, because that was that felt really unfair. It's wonderful to hear you've talked about creating safe zone for women and increasing the sentence for the prosecution. I think I would also like to add that part of this is raising awareness among men as well about how do men and women coexist, and what is okay and what's not. There has been a lot of talk about consent, and I think there needs to be a better culture of understanding among both men and women in terms of what's acceptable. I go back to my days when I was a student in school, and if somebody bullied you or somebody hit you, you knew that you could go and tell your professor, your teacher, and the person who thought of hitting knew that they would be in trouble. It's not okay, right? With the sexual harassment and assault, it almost feels flipped, because as women we are told to be safe and not step out at night, or how do we protect ourselves from being harassed or from being raped, versus telling everybody in the community that something like this is not okay, you cannot get away with it. So I think a part of the awareness also needs to be about how do we educate all the men in terms of what's acceptable behavior and what's their responsibility in this.
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, I think that this is not just a women's issue. It's a women's issue that also we need responsible men taking the lead and understanding that this is a time of gender equality. Of course, that means no sexual assault and the right policies on campuses. It also means equal pay for equal work. Women shouldn't be making 74 cents to $1. It also means making sure that women are have the right opportunities in terms of balance of work and life. And we have paid maternity leave. Right now, maternity leave is still a disability in this country. And it ought to be paid parental leave, because the expectation now is that a father should be as much of a caregiver as a mother, and it shouldn't be this gendered society that we have an expectation that women do the child rearing and men don't. So we need to change these norms, and these norms have to be changed not just by strong women leaders, but also by men in Congress who understand the importance of equality.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there is a lot to do and a long way to go. In fact, I think just in this week, I read an article that it will take it's expected that it will take 170 years before women get all equal rights as men. I hope that you'll work towards shortening this time and making it faster for women to get equal rights and equal opportunities and everything. I think you touched on a very important one about the maternity leave, about the parental leave. It's usually maternity, and even that's considered a disability. And currently, there isn't equal pay. Can you touch on a little more specifics you think that might be going on in Congress, or in terms of bills that could potentially help with improving these issues?
With which issues in specific? The women's issues?
Yeah, with women's issues about equal pay.
There's an equal pay for equal work bill, which I strongly support, which would require companies to disclose what they're paying every employee. And if women are systematically being paid less than men for the same position, those companies would be subject to lawsuits. And that is something that I think would really have a change in behavior, because then companies would look and make sure that they're actually paying men and women the same, like Salesforce has done up in San Francisco. So I strongly support that legislation, so that other companies will be forced to do what Salesforce did, which is systematically go through their payroll and see, are they paying men and women differently.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that would be really great to have that level of oversight on the companies to see if they're being equal, some kind of auditing process. That would be wonderful. Anything happening in legislature about the parental leave and changing those rules to include men, or to have a separate leave for maternity rather than considering it a disability?
Yes, this is something that both Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton have proposed, and I think that having maternity leave not be a disability should definitely get passed in the next Congress, and then having it to be a parental leave is something that Bernie Sanders talked about and that I support, and we need more young, frankly, members of Congress who understand this.
Yes, very much so. I totally agree. I don't think being pregnant is a disability, and I hope that soon it will not be considered that way. So
yeah,
thank you so much.
It's an outdated law, and it's no longer the case that just women are supposed to do the child rearing. I mean, men have to be equal partners in this, and so parental leave is as important.
Absolutely, yeah. Both men and women are working, so it's important that both of them can share the work of raising the child. Wonderful.
Yes.
So let me touch. Sorry, go ahead.
I agree with you.
Great. Let me talk about the next topic that impacts our community. So here in Santa Clara County itself, more than half of the adults and quarter of students are overweight or obese, and half of the deaths in our county are due to heart disease and cancer. When the Santa Clara County, as well as Fremont County, when they did their assessments of the county and came up with their health priorities, that is in the CHIP, they focused on two areas: chronic disease and healthy eating and active living, and working on behavior health, so mental health and substance abuse. Since we already touched a little bit on behavior health, I'd love to hear from you about how you could help with understanding and improving the chronic disease and improving the lifestyle of people.
Well, this is a huge issue. As you know, most of the cost in healthcare is the last few years of life, and it's to actually deal with these chronic conditions of either a heart attack or cancer or diabetes. And what we really need to do is preventive care, is making sure we're intervening before these conditions set in. That means the mental health, having the right mental health. It means exercise. It means having the right diet. It means having the right rest and sleep, and a healthy, holistic way of living. And I think we need to really have education geared towards that, have investments in people so that they can go and have gym memberships, so that they can go and have a right nutritionist and dietitian, and so that they don't develop these conditions over years that then require far more costs and that create far more stress.
Absolutely. I think it would be really wonderful to catch people upstream and support them, because it will improve the quality of life, so we don't get to the point that we are sick and having to live with these health challenges, and it will definitely help with the decreasing the cost of healthcare. Related to the healthy eating, healthy living, you brought up some really good points about helping with the gym membership and with food, healthy food habits, healthy lifestyle habits. Are there any initiatives and bills that are going on in this regard that could support the community, especially things that would come down all the way to support our local communities?
Absolutely. I think there's a bill that may provide tax credits for gym membership or a healthcare membership, or going to preventive care or a dietitian. And I think that would be a very helpful thing, that someone should be able to, just like you would contribute to a charity and can write that off. Maybe we make health membership, diet, a dietitian, nutrition, that these are things that you can get tax credits for to incentivize people to make that investment in their lives.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. In fact, I think as of right now, most of the supportive care modalities, so even the ones that are covered by insurance, like nutrition, mental health, physical therapy, they are very much underutilized and underprescribed. So I think even education to the healthcare professionals and to the community about utilizing those would be helpful. And it brings me to an ethnic issue related to this, is that many of us who are from various Asian and different immigrants, we are used to our natural forms of medicine, conventional, traditional forms of medicine that we use for preventive care as well as day-to-day health management. But a lot of these modalities and services, even though they're effective, are not covered by insurance. What do you think we can do further in terms of, this initiative you talked about, preventive health and getting access to a lot of these providers so that we can be actively engaged in taking care of our health early on?
Well, I think we've got to have far more investment in preventive health. Right now, the focus is so much on research for Alzheimer's or cancer or diabetes and heart disease, which is all very important. But what about making sure that people have a healthy life so that they're not incurring problems most of their lives? And that means having resources for people to have exercise, having resources on diet, having resources to make sure people have the time off they need if they have stress and can take off from work, make sure they're getting adequate sleep. A lot of young people aren't getting adequate sleep, and having a balance in terms of the workplace, not working 80 hours without sleep.
Yes, very true. I think most of us in here can relate to that.
Yeah.
With the long work hours, the less sleep, and the stress, and not having time to even go to the doctor.
Yeah, and those are the things that long term really hurt one's health.
Yeah, they do. They do. In fact, so I know it's a little bit of a digression, but we are right here in Silicon Valley. It's the heart of technology, and digital health is hot. What do you think that we can do to leverage technology to improve access to care and to address a lot of these issues we are talking about?
Well, I think there's so much potential. I mean, of course, as you know, that we are going to be able to map genetically the profile of individuals and can personalize medical care based on understanding person's unique DNA and unique genetic profile. And I think as medicine becomes more and more customized to meet individual needs, just like that customization has happened in so many other industries that could transform things, where the cure for cancer or the cure for heart disease for one person may be very different than for another person.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think our industry is at that cusp of revolution. A lot of great things are happening, and I hope that we are able to find better cures, faster cures, make it accessible, and be able to do a lot more in preventive health and behavior change, so that we can live healthier, happier lives. So let me move on to our next question. And that's about ethnicity. In our counties, Santa Clara and in Fremont and Cupertino, we have very high ethnic population, which is great. You know, it brings a lot of influx of people from all over the world, and it's a melting pot. So in fact, 2 out of 5 of our county residents are born outside of US, and half of the residents speak a language other than English. Now, while we benefit from all the diversity and the richness of the community, it also brings ethnic specific challenges. So some of these challenges, Ro, are, for example, the education material might not be available in the local languages. So whether it's in schools or it's in healthcare, a lot of times the care is not available to the same extent in the local languages. And there is to some extent discrimination of the ethnic communities and low-income population. So for example, I've heard this many times from my friends and from elders, is that if they go on their own, they don't get as much respect and care as if they as much as if they went with their children who are working professionals and educated and can speak English. So there is some discrimination. There is also lack of resources in the ethnic languages, and there is lack of understanding of the culture and the needs of the population. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. This will have to be the last question together, because it's I've got my next event. So I appreciate it. I really appreciate being on with your listeners and the work you do in the community. But I think that this district is so diverse. It's got one of the only majority Asian district in the continental United States. Huge South Asian population, huge Filipino, Chinese, Vietnamese, Latino, African American. So one, we have to understand what are the new unique ethnic needs of communities with regard to healthcare. For example, the South Asian community, as you know, diabetes and heart disease are huge issues, and we need more early screening for that. We need more early intervention for that. We need more resources. It's one of the reasons we need people in Congress, so that resources are allocated towards the diseases and things that affect these communities. And hepatitis A and hepatitis is often hepatitis B is often a issue in certain Asian communities, and we need more resources funding for that. We need more funding for different communities to understand what it's going to take for them to have the right diet, the right access to medicine, and that may be a different challenge for Asian and ethnic communities. So I think we have to really understand the unique needs of ethnic communities when having healthcare policy, and that's something that we can help make happen from this district.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Ro, for your time. I think you have such a wonderful understanding of our community and needs. And thank you so much for your time, and
thank you.
Good luck
Thank you
with
for
the
the work
election.
you do. I love that you're doing this show to help educate and inform the community on different issues. And of course, the one thing I will hope is everyone will cast their vote this time. It's a very important election. November with the president and Senate, and of course Congress, and local issues and propositions. And I hope every person will not only vote, but make sure that every person in their family is voting.
Absolutely. So we want to encourage all our viewers to please go vote. Voting is already starting, early voting is starting. So I hope that everybody will go and vote, and they will encourage their family and friends to go and vote, because we all need to have a voice in what happens in our community, and only then can we benefit from all the work that's being done by our potential candidates like Khanna. So I hope that everybody will go and vote. Thank you so much, Ro, for your time. We really appreciate it, and we wish you luck in the upcoming election.
Thank you, Sangeeta.
Thank you. So thank you, everybody. I hope that you will all go vote. I've put the link here for where you can go to vote and to find out if you're registered to vote in your local district. And you can find our YouTube videos related to health, to integrative medicine, quality of life, cancer, all on our YouTube channel. Please go visit our website. And the next session that I will be hosting for you is to help you with understanding the various propositions that we are going to be voting on related to healthcare, so you know what they mean, and you can take your stand on each of these propositions. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can know about all the upcoming videos and education. Post your questions and we are happy to answer them. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and have a wonderful night.